Hi, Sean.
How
Nice
are
to
you,
meet
Lindsay?
you today. Thank you very much for coming and letting me come in and share a story. So, first off, I wanted to just ask you right off the bat. I know you'd heard about our Phantom Menace piece and were interested in learning a little bit more about Deutsche Bank's and DWS's views on inflation. So far, what are kind of your thoughts and concerns surrounding the inflation story?
Well, I'll tell you, we've been hearing the inflation story for years from a lot of firms, and bottom line is you get a mixed message. And simply put, I think there's a lot of confusion out there in our clients' viewpoints about what is the future path of inflation. And that's why, we've heard a lot of talk about your piece, The Phantom Menace, and that's why I asked you to come in. Simply put, I'd love it if you could just run through what your thoughts are on Deutsche Bank.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, before we get started and going through the Phantom Menace, I'd like to learn a little bit about your business since I've never had an opportunity to sit down and meet with you before.
Sure.
So if you have a few seconds, can you give me kind of a 1 to 2 minute snapshot of how you run your business?
Yeah, simply put, the majority of my business is, really in fee-based accounts through the PIA platform. I do some retail business as well. I would say about 80-20. If you look at it, I run close to about $100 million, and about $80 million of that would be in my PIA.
Okay. And then how would you say your allocations are fixed income to equity? Where do you I would say utilize funds the most in fixed income dash equity side?
Where do I utilize funds the most in the fixed income equity
Well,
side?
yeah, give me an idea for where you would best use mutual funds in your business, whether
Sure.
it's fixed income or equity.
Sure. Well, I use funds for both, actually. Funds are a pretty big part of what I do. I like the variety that's out there in offerings that you get through a fund, and I really am a big fan of active management. So I would say, on the fixed income side, roughly 70% of what I'm doing is through mutual funds. On the equity side, it's probably closer to about 40%.
Okay. So then do you just buy individual equities for the other portion of your book?
No, I mostly ETFs.
Okay. Good to know. Well, thanks for giving me a nice snapshot of your business. It will definitely help us work together moving forward. And with that, I'll dive right into the Phantom Menace and kind of share our views surrounding the inflation right now.
Right.
So this is the piece, the long-awaited piece that you've been looking for. So we start out our piece just really talking about the definition of inflation and speaking about some of the past experiences with inflation. But what I wanted to delve into is really the understanding of how the CPI is figured and how that works. So with this chart here below, you can see how choppy the average CPI number has been. Then in 1983, the number smooths out considerably. So we had a lot of volatility before, and now pretty muted volatility, I'd say.
Yep.
So there's been changes that have taken place post 1983 that have made this number a lot more muted. As you can see here, how the CPI is figured, the housing price represents 42%
Sure.
of how CPI is figured. So what happened in 1983 is they stopped using housing prices and actually called people up to ask what they would rent their house for. Now, as you can imagine, that's going to mute the numbers severely because people are going to basically rent their house for their mortgage or the price of what they're paying to have their house. So that, in a large part, muted the CPI number. Again, in 1998, we had a change for quality enhancements, saying that a TV that you bought in 1990 might be, $400 more today. But really, that's not inflation because there's been quality enhancements and additional things added to the television to make it the same relative value. And the third way we've changed CPI is by product substitution. And very simply, this goes back to our Economics 101. If the price of steak goes up, they would say instead of you keep buying steak at a higher price, you would switch to hamburger meat instead.
Yeah.
So what that's done is our current one-year CPI is around 2.7%. But if you look at all of these changes that have taken place, really our pre-1983 calculation would be somewhere around 10%. So definitely the Phantom Menace here, as in that 8% discrepancy there. And we're not saying that inflation is at 10%, but we're definitely saying that we believe inflation is muted.
And this is today if you use the old method.
Exactly. Exactly. So what I wanted to also touch on too is is where our clients are really feeling inflation right now. And I think this is something that's very easy to put in front of your
That's
client
great.
and show, absolutely. So in our needs-based goods, the things that our clients and you and I buy every day, gas, bread, butter, bacon, those things are going up in price over the last 12 months. However, the want-based items that you and I and our clients buy very rarely, such as computers or cameras, those things are going down in price. So you're seeing and you're feeling inflation in the things that we buy more often.
So your stance is that it's understated?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And what I wanted to show you is where we're really seeing inflation at fighting asset classes allocated. In the average investor's portfolio, only 17% of their assets are in inflation fighting asset classes. So the other percentages are either neither or targeted towards deflation.
Okay.
So I will leave this piece with you to look over as you wanted
Appreciate
that.
it.
And I wanted to delve right into our, this is an awesome piece that you can use when you're sitting down with a client and speaking directly about inflation. What this piece goes over is all asset classes in the Morningstar style boxes. And it shows over time, over a 3, 5, 10, and a 15-year time frame, each asset class's correlation to inflation.
That's great.
You can see down here the asset classes that have the lowest correlation to inflation, which are mostly all your long-term government or even intermediate-term bonds. But where you're having the highest correlation to inflation is in the floating rate loan asset class, commodities, and ultra short bonds, and believe it or not, high yield muni is number 4 on the ranks. So I will leave this with you as well. This is a great conversation tool that you can sit down and have with your clients surrounding these asset classes. Based on what we've spoken about right now and today, where do you think you are underweight as far as inflation fighters with your current clients?
Well, thanks for asking. And simply put, one area I've avoided like the plague are bank loans. I've been burned by them before, and quite frankly, it's not an asset class I've looked at really, and I've heard every person coming in my office talking about it. I'd love to hear your viewpoint on the asset class as well.
Sure, no problem. So are bank loans, just to start out, so you're not using anything right now in the space at all?
I haven't. I used them before in 2003 when it switched to mark-to-market. I was in a fund that basically was Mainstay. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Okay, yes, of course.
My clients were caught holding the bag, and we had quarterly liquidity, and I don't know, is that still the way it's operating today?
We have daily liquidity on our portfolio,
Okay.
but every portfolio is different. Are bank loans an area that you would be open to using a mutual fund for, if we were able to?
I'd like to understand. This makes a lot of sense to me, and I really like what you said about inflation, and I do agree with your comments. And simply put, if that's an opportunity, I definitely want to look closer. Is there reason to be concerned? That I could have the same situation in 03 when.
Right. No, I would say that we are very optimistic about bank loans. It's definitely our strongest story right now. I would urge you that, and I'll show you this in our pieces. Let me grab it real quick. Is that
Okay.
We think that we're coming out of a recessionary environment, and typically when your bank loans are under stress, are periods where you're going into a recessionary environment.
Okay.
So we think coming out of a recessionary environment is really the best time to utilize bank loans.
Similar to high yield.
Absolutely. And you think about inflation, floating rate loans are correlated highly with inflation, the number 1 asset class. Bank loans are also the number 1 correlated asset class to inflation, to interest rates. So you have protection there if rates were to rise, but also if inflation was in the picture.
Okay.
But I'll run through our quick presentation on floating rates so you can kind of get an idea for our view. And this is what I was just speaking to, is that the way the yield curve is shaped is a great indicator for when and when not to be in a bank loan space. And this might help you out. You were just talking about how you were burned in 08, and you can see the yield curve was a declining yield curve. And those are the times when you definitely would not want to be
2 and 10 years, sure.
in a bank loan space. You can see when the yield curve is inverted, there's been periods where you have had negative returns.
Sure.
But what I would urge you to look at is when the yield curve is steep like it is today, we've never had a negative year in
That's
the
a
bank loan
phenomenal piece.
space. Thank you, thank you. So your best 3-year return is 7.39. The absolute worst 3-year return is a positive 4.06%.
And that's in an environment similar to today?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then what else I would like to get into right off the next bat is that bank loans are priced, and this is as of 3/31, but I would say the average bank loan is priced at about 95 cents on the dollar currently.
Okay.
And if you look back over time when we had similar pricing back in 03, your bank loans were trading at about 96 cents on the dollar. It took a full 13 months for the Fed to raise interest rates. You had a 9% return prior to rates rising. And then afterward, you had 13 full months where you were returning 6%. So that is an argument of a case that when you want to look at floating rate loans are right now when there's a discount in the space.
Okay.
So we're saying that.
So this is essentially just a buy-sell strategy?
Exactly, exactly. And this is really your indicator. When
Where were you 10 years ago?
I'm sorry?
Where were you 10 years ago?
Absolutely. Well, this is a great piece for you to use with your clients. And what I was going to also mention too is, see, you're going to be getting a really nice juicy yield here at that 6% return. And your sell strategy is you want to buy it now in preparation for rates rise. But once that yield gets really juicy and you've been getting it for a while, that's the time when you want to use your exit strategy.
Okay.
So, keep this in mind and really watch the yield curve. And we define a steepness in the yield curve is about a 1% change from the 2 to the 10 year.
Do you guys offer a competitive product in the area?
We do. I was just getting to that. Let me grab my back card here. I thought I had it right here. Hang on.
And I can look up later, that's fine.
No, I had it. Sorry. Well, I don't know what I did with it. Sorry, Sean. I'll get it to you for sure, though. We have a 5-star fund in the floating rate space. What I can tell you about our fund is that we were able to, and I can use this brochure for that. We were ranked in 2008, top 35%, 2009, the top 24th percent, and in 2010, top 30th percent.
Okay.
2008 was your worst bear market for floating rate, as you witnessed. 2009 was your bull market for floating rate. And then 2010, moderate to robust year. Our portfolio managers, Ty Anderson, were able to navigate all 3 of these totally different economic cycles.
Says a lot.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like that speaks wonders to a management team that's able to really navigate through those 3 years. So on our 3-year number, we're ranked in the top 6%. So I would urge you to look at our
Okay.
fund. I think that our management team's been together since 2001. They came over to DWS in 2007 as a team. So they've been running bank loan assets together as a team for about 10 years. And you'll see that we are pure play, one of the only pure play bank loan spaces, funds in the space. You have a lot of funds out there that substitute high yield. Our viewpoint there is that when you add high yield into your portfolio, you also increase the amount of credit risk that you're taking on. Because floating rate loans have half the default rate of high yield bonds, but double the recovery. So we think a pure play is the best way to access the floating rate market. And here's your fat card. Definitely take a look at that. On your PIA platform that you mentioned on the fixed income space, you might want to just circle that S share right there. DFRPX is the share class there, and the current yield is 4.3%.
Great.
Thanks
Lindsay.
again for your time, Sean. I really appreciate
Absolutely,
it.
thank you very much.